So, Dr. Gina, what about the issue of calcium? Then dairy is high in calcium, so how do you accommodate a vegan diet associated with calcium?
Well, there's a few ways to look at this. First of all, the underlying concern for most people is that they're not getting enough calcium. And the disease that people are concerned about is osteoporosis. So let's look at osteoporosis and prevention of osteoporosis as a whole, not just with diet. As a whole, besides diet, we need to be getting enough weight-bearing exercise, including walking, yoga, holding the poses longer, potentially wearing a weighted vest so that you're stressing the bones so that they'll build stronger, avoiding caffeine, avoiding smoking, and things like that. Coming to diet, just because a food item contains a certain amount of calcium doesn't mean it's available to your body. So dairy might be said to contain a lot of calcium, and certainly we've all been brainwashed to believe that. But the bioavailability is different in different studies. And to be fair, there's a lot of calcium in certain green leafy vegetables. The bioavailability also varies. Oxalate is a compound present in some leafy green vegetables, such as spinach, which makes the bioavailability of calcium low. Iron is still high in spinach, but calcium is low for spinach. Fortunately, we have kale, collards, bok choy, broccoli as prominent examples of lower oxalate vegetables that provide a good amount of bioavailable, absorbable calcium. So if we get plenty of food sources, that'll put us in good stead. And I would consider the role of dark green leafy vegetables to be so underplayed in nutritional recommendations. I would almost consider that we should make sure to get at least 1 to 2 servings of green leafy vegetables per day, preferably these dark leafy calcium-rich vegetables. And that for me is the foundation for a vegan to be healthy in terms of getting adequate bioavailable calcium. You need to chew it properly or boil it to break down the cell walls if you're unable to digest it raw. Personally, I have a little bit of a hard time digesting it raw, so it's helpful for me to either boil it or steam it, or in some cases blend it with other things and make a smoothie out of it. Supplementation is also a possibility if you're not consistently getting enough in your food. And although there have been studies showing an association with prostate cancer for some men, and there's also been some studies showing an association of supplements with increased heart disease risk, we'd have to look very carefully at whether those supplements were being given with vitamin D or not, and what the other factors for these populations were. And I don't think necessarily that would rule out the helpfulness of supplements for people that have been vegan. And so I personally, because I think it's important based on the literature to get at least 500 milligrams of calcium per day, I do take a 500 milligram supplement, and I try to get as much as I can through my diet in terms of green leafy vegetables. And also personally, I think that calcium in my soy milk is also a good source of calcium. And I'm not worried about soy. Whole soy products such as soy milk and tofu, which have been used in Asia, like in China and Japan, have been found to be protective against heart disease, even though you'll see online so much that's negative about soy. So I will have a multiple-pronged strategy to make sure that I get enough calcium, including food, supplementation, primarily through fortified soy foods, and then also sometimes taking a tablet or something like that. Because I think, for me, it's more important to get adequate calcium than to be worried about long-term effects that may or may not apply. And I also get vitamin D with that. So vitamin D is important for calcium metabolism. If we really take a look at calcium, we see it's not as simple as dairy in, osteoporosis out, because the countries that have the most milk consumption have the highest risks of fractures.
What about protein? What about the protein, how interacting, relating to calcium, and also protein being a complex protein that's similar to what's available in meat? How do you achieve that as a vegan?
Okay, so there has been some studies showing that protein given as an isolated product in laboratory conditions results in calcium being leached from the bone, so that eating higher in protein, and particularly sulfur-containing amino acids, which are found in meat, can result in an increased risk of osteoporosis. That's the inference that's made from those types of studies. But recently it seems that they haven't always borne out in other studies that look at protein in the context of a whole diet, not just in terms of isolated protein. So I'm not sure we can hang our hats on that. Also, I don't think we should be worried about getting too little protein, because generally in our Western industrialized countries in which people are getting adequate calories, we're getting adequate protein. We do have to be sensible about what to eat and make sure that we get a varied diet, including not only fruits and vegetables and grains, but including some higher protein legumes, dals, tofu, non-soy beans, nuts. All of those things are good sources of proteins. But if we're getting a good variety of those, and they don't have to necessarily have to contain what was previously thought as complementary proteins, our bodies are capable of synthesizing what we thought was of complete protein from all these different sources. So the person that came out with that theory, Frances Moore Lappé, who talked about the need for complementary proteins at each meal, has since revised her position. The research no longer supports that. That was based on lab rat data and doesn't hold true for people. So protein, unless you're a bodybuilder, doesn't require such careful planning. Mm-hmm. If you're a bodybuilder, whether you're vegan or omnivore, you can look at your different sources of protein, and you can meet them from vegan sources. You just have to eat a lot more.